My name's Joost. I'm Dutch, which you'll probably hear every once in a while when I get a word wrong. I'll tell you a very tiny bit about me because I don't regularly speak at conferences like these, so you might not know me. I'm a bit of a geek, basically, although you probably wouldn't tell by the suit. I did a lot of coding and still do a lot of coding. But I'm also a marketer by background. I studied theology at university, became an affiliate, a marketeer, SEO, speaker, blogger. Well, you know the whole ram bam. So that what turned me into probably an online marketeer, which is what I do for a living, mostly SEO consulting and SEO training. And I blog at Joost.com. Now I want to see a show of hands who actually knows my website, so I know how many people I'm fooling today. Okay, good, thanks. I do a podcast as well, which I want you guys to listen to every week, please. But that's enough about me. I've got about 40 tips. Some of them are very simple, some of them are quite advanced. I hope everyone picks up a few that you can do something with, because it's pretty hard to gauge a crowd like this and know what level you all are. And I'll start up with speed, because if we're talking about WordPress, right, and most WordPress websites have one problem if they're not properly optimized, that is that they're god-awful slow. We have quite a reputation for, as a community for WordPress, for being slow in development, slow in doing basically anything, but mostly slow in loading pages. Luckily, my buddy Frederick Towns built a plugin called W3 Total Cache, and yes, that is different than WP Super Cache if you're using that on your blog. W3 Total Cache is like 20 times better than that. Frederick's my business partner. He built it for Mashable, of which he's the CTO, to make sure that Mashable actually works on a decent amount of servers instead of like 50. Yeah, just figure it out. It's a bit of work to set up, but it really makes WordPress actually perform quite well. And even the basic settings with like just enabling it and setting page cache in there, and enabling the page cache will make a huge difference to anyone visiting your site. It has another option in there that does things like combine CSS files and JavaScript files to make them faster, which is what Google is pushing everyone to do these days, because they want everyone to make their sites load faster. So they're pushing all these things out there that you should make your site fast. Well, this is the way to do it. How many of you use WordPress and have plugins in it? I want to see a show of hands, everybody. How many of you have more than 10 plugins in their WordPress installs? How many of you have more than 20? 30? None. I'm guilty. I've got about 55 in my own, I think. But to be honest, most plugins are crap. Not including my own. But these days you have to be pretty scared of actually installing new plugins, because what people don't realize is that a plugin, when it runs, basically has administrator rights and can do everything it wants to your site. So it can delete it, it can delete the database, it can delete or add users, it can do a lot of shitty things. And I've actually come across way too many shady SEO plugins the last few months to still have good faith in humanity. I've seen plugins recently that were running on thousands and thousands of blogs that installed a backdoor for the owner of the plugin, to log in and add links to his own site. And other plugins that basically add their own content networks within your site and ridiculous stuff like that. So make sure that the plugins you're using are trusted. Preferably use only the ones that are on WordPress.org, and don't use any of the other ones. Now, the ones on WordPress.org don't actually get checked either, but if someone finds something wrong in there, they will get deleted very soon. So I recently pulled a stunt myself where someone had a very bad plugin, and with help of the core developer team for WordPress, we basically deleted the plugin and all the installs it was running on. And I was talking to my friends at Google Search Quality, and they were telling me, yeah, there was about 5,000 .info domains running on that plugin, and we basically got rid of all of them. And this sort of stuff happens all the time. People get their blog hacked or do stupid stuff with plugins and then blame WordPress for being unsafe. When it's not, it's just you who has to be more careful using these things. The good thing is, if you get rid of a lot of plugins, your site usually becomes faster as well. Now, another thing to really speed up your site, and this has a ridiculous effect and has become so much cheaper the last few years, is the usage of CDN, a content delivery network, which basically means that you're putting your images in JavaScript on a network that's made purely for serving out small files, and is usually closer to your visitors than your own web server is. So Joost.com is hosted in Chicago, but the CDN I'm on would have a local server here in London, so you'd load the HTML from Chicago, but you'd get the images from cdn.joost.com, which has a server here locally in London, which would be way faster than anything it could ever be. Google actually has a free CDN for Ajax libraries like jQuery and stuff like that, which is pretty useful, not only because you don't have to pay for it, but also because if you load jQuery from Google on your site, and other sites do that too, the browser for your visitors will cache that jQuery and not request it when it comes to another site that also uses jQuery. And since the entire web is using jQuery right now, or at least large parts of it are using jQuery, that actually increases the speed of all those websites. For the more technically inclined, there's a very cool service called spriteme.org. It was built by Steve Souders. He works for Google and wrote the book Building Faster Websites, and the incredible cool sequel Building Even Faster Websites. But CSS sprites are basically all your images on your website combined into one image, so people only have to download one image instead of multiple ones, thereby reducing page load time. Spriteme.org makes that very, very simple. Just go check it out, see how it works. If you don't get it, get someone else to do it, because you have to be a bit techie to be able to do this, but it really makes the process quite painless. How many of you have a widget on their sidebar of one of their blogs saying how much their blog is worth, or what their Technorati rank is, or that they love SEO mods? Which I do too, but you just don't put that in your sidebar. Stuff like that really adds to your page load time. It's almost always it's a JavaScript that gets added to your page, so it's another thing that the user who visits your site has to go get. So get rid of all that crap. It's ridiculous how much crap I come along each time when I review WordPress sites. Well, it's obvious, perhaps, but $6 a month hosting, if you're actually making money off of that website, won't cut it. So don't go cheap on your hosting and pay for it afterwards. It's ridiculous. Who here has a WordPress blog without pretty permalinks, or with pretty permalinks with the post ID or the date in it? Good. I hate those with a vengeance, seriously. People tell you that having the post ID in the URL will be faster if you use a proper caching plugin like W3 Total Cache. That isn't actually true. So you can get rid of all of that and just make the cleanest URLs you can. So either with just the post name or the category in it if you want to. but make them clean, short, and nice, and get rid of really all the other stuff, especially the date, because, well, in a year or two, your blog post, which might look very fancy and new now, will look very dated, and will actually, as a result of that, get less clicks. Especially now that Google is showing the date snippets in search results all the time. So what I do, and if you're more advanced, you can do this yourself as well, I remove the date snippets from posts older than a year, because I don't actually want Google to show the fact that I wrote a certain article in 2007, because people will think it's not viable anymore, when it's still very good content and all the advice still works. I'm sort of surprised to have to say this, but I was going over a couple of the sites of people I knew were coming, and I was still seeing uncloaked affiliate links. I'm like, guys, come on. You can't fucking do this anymore. Google is seriously... I don't know how it is in the UK, because I don't do much work here, but both in the US and in Holland, they've been banning Fin affiliates left, right, and center. Like, really a lot of very big affiliates going out of the SERPs completely. People losing, I've seen in Holland travel sites lose 50 first page rankings for very high level travel keywords in a day. They were gone from number 1 to 51 on each of those keywords. Hide the fact that you're an affiliate and do it properly. And doing it properly means that you do a redirect through your own site, so you do /out/whatever to link to something, and you have a script that actually does that redirect for you. Then you block that /out for in your robots.txt for Google, and if Google still opens it, which they will, you send them another page. And yes, that involves real cloaking software. It involves going to phantommaster.com or wherever and getting yourself a real cloaking database. You don't do that just on a user agent. If you're serious about this shit, you do it well, or you get screwed. Another thing that I get annoyed with is when I see a WP login page indexed on a site. Mostly because it means that you haven't upgraded for about 2 versions, because it's now a default no index page that doesn't actually get indexed. So if your WP login page is indexed, then every hacker in the world will know, that's an old version of WordPress. These hacks should work. So get rid of that. There's a couple of plugins, including my own SEO plugin, that will allow you to no index all those pages so they don't show up even if you're on an old version. There's really no reason to have these things in the SERPs. That's the first mention of my WordPress SEO plugin. I'm afraid I'm going to do a couple more. It's called WordPress SEO. With all the smart people out there, you'd think someone else would have come up with the name WordPress SEO for an SEO plugin, but the name was still free on WordPress.org. So yeah, go check it out. I think it's quite cool. It's free, so that basically makes me a dickhead and you all winners. Another thing is write good meta descriptions. Who here uses all-in-one SEO? Who uses the auto-generate descriptions function in that? Because all-in-one SEO is okay-ish, but auto-generating meta descriptions the way all-in-one SEO does is pure and utter crap.
Yeah, what's that?
So if you use it, get rid of it, and either write good descriptions or don't write them at all. Google will do a better job at auto-generating it than your WordPress install will ever do. Now, of course, there's a good chance that if you do a product site or you actually have like a load of poker listings or whatever, if you can template it properly and make certain variables appear well in that description, you might actually get proper descriptions. So if you know what you're doing and you know how to template something like that, do it and do it well. But auto-generating it from the first sentence of each page is just stupid. By default, WordPress still does this wrong. It'll link to previous posts, and that's it. So that means that a post, if you have 10 posts on each page, if you go 21 posts back, that means 2 clicks from the front page. That means that your really old posts never get indexed anymore because they're gone, basically. Especially because this also happens on category pages and tag pages and all the stuff that you use to make sure that Google indexes your entire site. I'm sorry if I'm only mentioning Google all the time. I come from a country where Google has a market share of 99.6%, so we don't actually have any other search engines anymore. There's a couple of plugins. WP Page Navi is very good for this. And this presentation will be up for download later, so you don't have to write all this down if you don't want to. There's another feature that was introduced a while back in WordPress called Paged Comments. It was on by default for a couple of versions. If you installed your first WordPress install from somewhere between a year and a half back to 6 months ago, it would have been on by default, and it will still be on, and it sucks. Because what it does is it adds comment page 1 and comment page 2, etc. in the URL if you have more than a certain amount of comments, which basically gives a pretty big duplicate content problem which you can't solve easily. This is pretty hard to read, I guess, because the conversion went wrong, but in WordPress 2.9 and WordPress 3.0, we got a couple of very neat new functions called custom taxonomies. So basically you can roll your own categories or tags. So you can basically build an IMDb or a site like that easily on WordPress now. It's really possible. And there's a couple of plugins. If you can download the presentation later, so you can actually click the links and check out the plugins and play with it. But what it allows you to do is create a way better structure for your site, because you can do all sorts of cool stuff. Instead of just having posts, you can have an album directory where you have a custom post type for the artists on it, and a custom post type for the genre, or a custom taxonomy for the genre. You can do all these cool things. It's built into WordPress. It's really easy to use, and it adds value to what you're doing on your site, which I guess is the biggest lesson Google is teaching everyone in the affiliate sphere at the moment. If you're not adding value, you're going out. Now, you also have to do some maintenance on your WordPress blog every once in a while, and people forget about this because I get so many calls from people saying, yeah, my site's been hacked and I don't really have a backup. I'm like, yeah, well, you're screwed. Nothing I can do, seriously nothing anyone can do if you don't back up your data. So just back up every few hours. There's a couple of good plugins that do this for you. Automatic, the company behind WordPress, and Matt Mullenweg, the founder, have a plugin called WordPress, which is a bit on the expensive side for most average WordPress users because it's like $50 a month. But what they do is they security scan your site all the time and make sure that everything on there is constantly backed up. It's a ridiculously well done service. It's really good. And if you're making money from your site, and you're making good money from your site, you should be running it. Another feature that got introduced in, I think, 2.7 is that WordPress will repair its own MySQL DBs if they go broke or bust. This happens especially on larger sites with a lot of posts and comments, etc. So every once in a while, your MySQL will just die on you. Having this in your WP config might actually prevent that dying from happening, and might also prevent your site from going down. So there's no real reason to not have it there. Next to backing up your database, you should also back up your files all the time. if you're doing modifications to your themes and your plugins and you don't really have the time to do all that over again when someone hacks into your site, and WordPress sites do get hacked every once in a while, it just happens. So make sure that you back everything up. I have to say this plugin is the best I could find at the moment next to WordPress. I would just use WordPress. If you're here, I'm assuming you're here because you make money doing all this shit. If you're not, get away. Or try harder, but yeah, don't go broke because someone hacks into your site. If you're more on the technical side, and it's a plugin called Debug Queries will actually help you figure out which of your plugins actually make your site so slow. Running this every once in a while might make you realize that your blog is a bit more, or website based on WordPress is a bit harder to work with than you actually thought it was. Akismet, another service by Automatic. I can't stand spam comments, and there's no real reason to have them with the couple of plugins I'll show you now. Akismet is one. David Naylor, who's here as well today and tomorrow, has a pretty cool plugin that allows you to check for the referrer for a comment. So you'll see in the email you get, you'll see the referrer from the person that left that comment on your site, allowing you to see whether they did a query in Yahoo Site Explorer to see where they could spam someone to get a few backlinks. And yes, people do that, and people aren't that stupid. So use stuff like that. Who here uses a script to feed his WordPress? So to push data into it. I've seen the funniest thing the other day when a supermarket site in Holland were doing the same. They're getting stuff from all over the web and making a daily recommendations list. And they were apparently scraping one site that wasn't really liking it. And then that site started giving them fake content. So instead of the usual bread or diapers or whatever, they were getting chopped off hats and other things in their feed, and they weren't really checking. So for a couple of days this happened, and their entire site looked like shit because they had these bad pictures on there and all these remarks below, like, you're stealing our content, now we're stealing your site. Check that stuff. It's not hard to check on your site every once in a while and make sure that what you've automated is actually still doing what it does. Web hosts go down. If you follow me a bit on Twitter, you might have noticed that last week my own Joost.com was actually down for 8 straight hours. I can tell you that hurts. Especially because my web host wasn't able to put a 503 up, but put a 404 error up, so I got like completely de-indexed. Luckily, I got indexed enough so that I was back like 5 hours later, but it's ridiculous to see what happens. And you want to know, so, well, at some point you don't want to know anymore if it's 8 hours. I use ping them, and it sends you a text message every once in a while when your site is down, and if it's 8 hours, you sort of get sick and tired of the text messages. But it's a very useful tool to make sure that if your site goes down, you know about it. There's a couple of plugins as well that will help you track your uptime. But the thing about a plugin tracking your uptime is that it's down when your blog's down, so it doesn't really work all the time. A similar thing. There's a couple of good plugins out there that'll help you find 404s on your site. 404 Notifier is one. My own Google Analytics plugin actually logs the 404s in Google Analytics. Redirection, which is another plugin, has a 404 logger too. So there's several options to see the 404s on your website that people are encountering and do something about it. Now, there's also a plugin that checks for broken links on your website. My experience is that it's not really that cool of a plugin because it's actually terribly slow. So if you want to check for broken links on your website, just use it, download a tool and use that. You'll have to write that one down because it's not in the presentation. If you're on Windows, Xenu, X-E-N-U. If you're on a Mac, there's another tool which I failed to come up with now, which I'll throw up later. There's a couple of tools that will actually make it easy for you to check your 404s, and you'll get scared, especially if your site grows older. You'll see that there's so many 404s happening all over your site that people encounter and Google encounters, and that's not really a good thing. WordPress seems to make a habit of adding more shit into your site's head section with every release. There's plugins like my own WordPress SEO plugin that'll just let you check the boxes to remove all that because it's not needed. Yeah, just do that. Especially if you're not using external editors, disable that functionality within WordPress if it's not already disabled, because it is one of the most used hacks for WordPress still. It cracks me up, but I still see sites, and I don't care what you do, I still see sites that don't have Twitter and Facebook buttons. And there really is no reason not to have one. If you're getting links, and I assume that some of you are buying links at some point in time, or getting them through whatever fake programs you're using. If you're getting links and there's no social activity at all about your site, then it's very easy for Google to profile that and to say, hey, nobody's talking about it, but he's getting links, they must be bought. And yes, this happens, and especially with a couple of the American clients, I've felt the pain. So make sure that you actually allow people to share, and that you actually respond to that as well, and that you have a bit of a social campaign. Well, this is getting harder and harder to read, but as soon as you have someone who's signed up for your site, for a newsletter or whatever, make sure that you add a refer a friend button on the thank you page, and some other stuff on the thank you page. They've already engaged with you. Use that momentum and add some other stuff in there that you can use to upsell them, do whatever. And the same goes for commenting. I've actually got a comment redirect button plugin myself that allows me to redirect someone when he leaves a comment for the first time on my site. I redirect him to a special thank you page, thanking him for commenting and saying, you might want to subscribe to the newsletter, and here are some articles you might want to read. You have to drag all these people in and keep them in all the time. Who here knows what the gravatar is? A few of you. If you've seen on blogs the commenting with an avatar icon next to it, and you don't see where people would be uploading their icons, that's because they use a gravatar. Gravatar.com is a service, again by Automatic, that allows people to use the same icon which is attached to their email address all over the web, which is really, really useful if people are discussing the same, well, on different blogs, but with the same people, so they can recognize each other. So make sure that you actually allow people to do that. And if you're using WordPress and you're not using all this commenting stuff, I really urge you to reconsider allowing comments on certain pages. Google has never, ever banned a community site that actually added value to its community. Even if it's an affiliate site, Google will see the fact that because there's a lively community there and people respond to each other and it's all there, Google will see that there's value and they won't ban you. If the only thing you do is write optimized content and you use WordPress because you're lazy and like to build sites fast, which I can understand, I do the same, but make sure that there's a bit of a community or a social aspect or anything else that makes sure that you add value. If you're not adding value, you're basically going to lose. I said before I came in here, I was talking to a guy from Affiliates for You. I said, well, I think if you have to learn one thing, and we'll talk about this more tomorrow in the SEO panels, but what I'm seeing more and more is that affiliates have to learn to build brands, not websites. You have to learn to build something that is a bit more than just another throw-up website, because you're going to get squashed. Now, you can't read this, but the best social tip I can give you today is to buy me a beer. If you get me a Grolsch, I'll be really impressed. A bit of analytics. If you're not wearing a tinfoil hat and you're not German, use Google Analytics. If you are German, Google Analytics actually brings with it some problems because of the law in Germany, so it might be better for you to use something else. You can doubt whether this should be here, but if you have an RSS feed for your site, what you should be doing is adding a bit of content to each post that links back to your original post. So I have Joost.com/test post. If you go to the RSS feed for that, you'll see that in the content underneath, it'll say this is a post from Joost.com. You can find the original article here. Why do I do that? Because most scrapers are stupid and they'll just scrape the entire thing, including my own backlinks. So when I get scraped, I usually just laugh, because Google is seeing that, is seeing the link back to me, and they are actually helping me rank, which is a way better. It's a way better to spend your time that way than to fuzz about people scraping your site, because it happens, especially if you become popular. It just happens. My WordPress SEO plugin can do that. There's another plugin called Better Feed that can do this as well. If you're using RSS, and don't overestimate RSS, but for some sites it can be very useful. So if you're targeting affiliates or techie people, they will usually use RSS. Make sure that you tag the links in your RSS feed, so you actually know how many people click through to your website from your RSS feed. It's a plugin called RSS Link Tagger by a Dutch friend of mine called Timon. He was kind enough to actually allow me to steal the code and put it in my own Google Analytics plugin as well, so you can just use that. The same goes actually for traffic coming from Twitter. 50% of your Twitter traffic, especially the mobile Twitter traffic, will show up as direct traffic in your Google Analytics if you do nothing about it. So you won't have a clue how much traffic Twitter is sending you, because you can't see it. There's a couple of solutions. None of them are waterproof, but there's a couple of solutions to things you can do. You can read about them there. As I said, this will come up later. Another thing, if you use campaign tracking, use the hashtag campaign tracking wherever you use it. Google allows you to put the hash there instead of the question mark. With the question mark, Google, and yes, it's Google Analytics, and Google should be smart enough to get rid of all these Google Analytics campaign tags in their indexing, but they're not. So if you use this, Google won't actually index it and won't give you all sorts of duplicate content problems. Well, the comment redirect I mentioned earlier, the plugin I use on my own site, also allows me to track first-time commenters as a specific goal within my website. And it's actually pretty cool to see whether people do repeat comments or first-time comments. I value them both of them as much. But for some posts, you'll see that you get a lot of new first-time commenters, which means that that post has struck a new audience. So I track all my comments as a goal. There's several ways of doing this. The easiest way is to do a bit of JavaScript. And RSS subscribers the same way. Click. And then when you do all that correctly, you can actually see which traffic leads to people that actually engage with your website. So they either click out to your poker or whatever affiliate link, which is good, or they subscribe to something, which is good, or they do nothing. And each type of traffic will have different things for all of these. The thing is that people will try to get on the front page of Dig, for instance, and I hate Dig because Dig has sent me shitloads of visitors, but it has never sent me decent amounts of signups for my newsletter or decent amounts of people who actually engage with my website. So they might as well not be there, unless you're selling your ads on a CPM basis, but well, I'm afraid that most of the merchants out there aren't that stupid. Lastly, I have a blog metrics plugin, which you can also use on on basically any WordPress site. But what it does is it uses a lot of stuff that Avinash Kaushik came up with, the Google Analytics guy, to actually track whether you're improving in your writing and in your engagement with your blog. Because it shows you how many posts you wrote that month and how many words you wrote and how many average comments you got that month. Now the cool thing is it shows this for you, but if you're smart and you're starting a bigger site, then you've got a couple of authors. And it'll show you that by author. So you can actually evaluate your different blog authors that way and see which guys are getting the most engagement out of your audience and which guys are getting you the most new links, because it'll track all the pingbacks and trackbacks, etc. as well. So it actually allows you to really evaluate who's doing well, who's not doing well, to kick out the writers who are not doing well, hire new ones, and get going. That's it. Quick plug for a very small conference we're doing in Amsterdam. You can read more about it later. And I've got some time for questions, I think. Basically anything you want to ask about WordPress is okay with me, or anything else. Yeah, so gentleman is saying a lot of websites copy your content. Are you losing rankings because of that? The thing is, Google says that they're pretty good at duplicate content, and sometimes they are, sometimes they're absolutely not. If you're doing all the stuff well to make sure that you get indexed fast enough with your new content, usually you'll be the one outranking everyone else if they know you. The thing is, if you've got a blog that's like somewhere deep down and Google doesn't know about it too much, and I copy your content on my blog, the chance of me outranking you is very, very big, even when you were originally the one pushing that content. To be honest, it's pretty hard to beat that other than to keep working. And you can do all sorts of things about it. You can do DMCA requests and all other things towards Google and other services. It gets boring really fast. Yeah, if it's actually happening to article websites, then at the moment it's a good time to email Matt or other people at Google about it, because they're like getting spammed to the gazillions. I don't know if you've all read the posts about what's happening to Stack Overflow, which is a very big question and answer site, which is getting scraped in the same way and was being outranked by its scrapers, and they're working very hard on fixing that. It's actually a pretty hard thing to fix. I wish I could give you a simple, easy answer like this is the solution. As I said, doing a thing like an RSS footer might help some scrapers from actually not hurting you but helping you, but other than that, it's pretty hard. You know, the thing is, if I do something like that on my domain, which is, what is it, a PR6 or whatever, and has loads of trust, then it's actually very easy for Google to say that's probably the original one and you probably stole it. So it's hard to beat. I'd love to give you a simple answer, but there is none.
Okay, so recently I bought a $50 a month PR7 image link with keywords in the alt tag. I just wanted to know your opinion on whether or not that's worthwhile doing, or if that's sort of a bad shout.
It's worthwhile doing, yeah. It depends a bit on how aggressive you are in your optimization and what kind of niche you're in. I mean, in a lot of niches you won't need to do stuff like that, but all the on-page stuff has actually gotten more important over the last few months than it was for quite a while. So doing your headings right, doing the proper alt tags on images, doing all that sort of stuff right actually helps a lot now.
So you said that's worthwhile doing?
It's absolutely worthwhile doing. It's absolutely worthwhile automating as well, because it's a lot of work.
Does it depend on the size of the image? Could you have a 1x1 pixel, stuff that with alt, and then link that out?
Well, it's basically the same as hiding text in your website, which is a stupid idea.
Yeah.
So the thing is, you'll get ranked for it. It'll work for a couple of months. You'll get banned, and you've screwed another domain. And if you're stupid about it, you've screwed a couple of accounts that were related to that domain. Google will track you down and basically kill everything they see. And yes, they do that. So, yeah, I just make sure that it's still valuable for the user, add real value, and do something decent.
Hi, I'm wondering about what you said about the comment pages. You were saying that like Google thinks of that as duplicate content, but from what I remember, WordPress, the later versions of WordPress, have canonicals included. Doesn't that like help against what you were saying?
It does. The thing is that 301 redirects, which it gets otherwise if you disable it, are a lot faster still than canonicals. And canonicals are getting the shit spammed out of them by some people at the moment. So we're doing some weird things with canonicals. We'll talk a bit more about that tomorrow, but you can do weird things with canonical link elements, and it's funny, and it helps solve the problem a bit, but Google will still index it. It'll still have to spend time on that it's not spending on other posts on your website that it could be indexing. So if you think a bit of it as Google will crawl 100 pages on your website, do you want it to crawl comment page 1 and comment page 2, or do you want it to crawl 2 other articles? That's basically the thought you need to have.
Yeah.